B3 guidelines and SB 2030 overview with Pat Smith. And then finally, how Fergus Falls has used B3 design and SB 2030 for their library. So I encourage all of you to share questions or comments in the chat as we're going through. If you have questions for any of our speakers, feel free to use the raise your hand icon. And during the Q&A at any time, unmute yourself and ask your question as well. And so we'll kick things off here with Cheri. And I'm going to let you share your screen.
All right, it says I am not a presenter.
Oh, you're right. I didn't do that part yet. Let me get you added.
There we go. Let's see, which screen do I want to share? This one. All right. Hopefully you can see the Minnesota benchmarking site.
Yes.
All right, awesome. So for those that are completely new to B3 benchmarking, this is Minnesota State's B3 benchmarking site. So it's mn.b3benchmarking.com, and it'll get you to this landing page. All of these menu items are open to the public. And then once you have a user account, you'll have a spot here on the launch to sign in. I'm already signed in, so you would be prompted for your email address. And then you would get a launch screen that would bring you into something that looks similar to this. On the left here is the navigation panel. This is where you'll see what organizations or what sites you have access to. We can break down our access at both the organization and the site. So you could have view access to a whole organization and maybe just edit access to a handful of sites. You know, so if you've got people managing specific buildings, but yet you want them to see the city as a whole, that's one way to handle that. So I have an organization here called B3 Support Demo, and you guys get the benefit of seeing some brand new functionality that is going in, fingers crossed, tonight. So I am in our dev environment. There's always the caveat of demoing in a dev environment that things might not always go as planned, but I wanted to be able to show you guys the new stuff that's coming out. A little sneak peek. So the main landing page here, once you come into your organization, if you have multiple organizations, it'll open up to the first one and on the dashboard. So these are all widgets that are customizable to each user. So if you want, you know, everyone in your city to be looking at the same stuff, each user would have to set up their dashboard individually. But that can be done here with the gear icon in the upper right-hand corner. And you can change what the widgets are reporting on. Some of them have additional breakdowns where you can break out. Here I've got all energy sources, and then I went down specifically in this one to look at electric. You've got the ability to add multiple widgets. And then some of them you'll see if you decide it's no longer value or you've got too many, you can delete some of them as well. The map widget and the metric widget are the two that you cannot delete, but you can drag them around. So if you really don't want to see the map, you can drag it to the bottom and out of that prime real estate spot. You can also resize these. So if you wanted to squeeze in a little bit more and get 4 across, that's an option too. And so you can see just with these little dots down here, and then maybe the map doesn't even let me go smaller. There we go. And then you can just drag them around. Let me do one more here. All right, it's not cooperating. My screen might not be sized to get 4 across right now. And then there's always the ability to reset. So that'll send it back to the original layout. So you can see here in my organization, most of my buildings are here in Minnesota. I do have this one straggler out here in Massachusetts. So it's going to zoom in as close as it can to ensure that it's covering all of your sites. So, and feel free to jump in. I'm bad at looking or paying attention to the raise hand thing. So if you do have questions, feel free to jump in. I'm going to drill in just to one specific site right now, just because we don't have a ton of time. But you can see all the metrics stay the same. It zooms in a little bit closer to this particular site. And this is all fictional information. So if this is really, actually it's not, 1234 Main Street. So we've got our building information. This is what's feeding into that energy model of deciding what the benchmark EUI is. And so since this building is already defined, it jumps to the details. This is where you may want to fine tune what your building is made of, how it's operated with scheduling and conditioning. And then for those that really know their building, they can get into some of the advanced attributes here of defining plug load, ventilation, etc. If you're looking to get an Energy Star score, we're integrated with Energy Star. So being able to define some of those additional property use details that Energy Star has. Some of it we can inherit from the information already in B3. And then some of it we will use the defaults, which you can override if you do know that information. So this will feed into your Energy Star score. These other three will feed into your benchmark model, and we'll get into what those individual metrics are. We have the ability to version. So in this case, you can see the original building was 41,000. In 2015, we added a 20,000 square foot addition. So that brought it up to 61. The allocation of the spaces stayed the same, but you could redefine if that was all classroom space that got added, allocate all 20,000 of that to this classroom. This is also where you can decommission a site. So if you do have buildings that the cities are no longer operating, you can decommission that so that you keep track of all that historical data and not just delete it out. So that's kind of a quick run through on the building editor. We do have the ability here with these plus signs to add additional buildings. There's a wizard that will walk you through. You can just type in an address. It will find the building. It will do its best to estimate the square footage. And then you can override that if it's not quite accurate. Down here at the bottom of the data tab, and you can resize these, we've got a diagram that just highlights how the building is connected to the meters. Switching over here to this dorm, you can see that their dorm site has actually 3 buildings. Each of them has its own electric meter, but they're all sharing the same steam meter. And without sub-metering in place, we have no idea how much of the steam is going to each of the buildings. And so we've got it set up as a multi-building site. And then 2 of them here have some cooling with this chilled water meter. We're able to import data. So you can use a Excel spreadsheet to get data in, and Leo will talk about being able to automate if you've got Xcel or CenterPoint. The data that does get put into B3 can be exported back out. And then if you do have data in Portfolio Manager that you want to bring into B3, we have this connection wizard. And so this is the tool that we use for the utility automation. They push their data through Portfolio Manager. And then for really large portfolios, if you want to be able to search, if you've got an account number or meter number and you can't tell what site it belongs to, you can use that meter search to be able to find it. And all of these tools and more are available in the upper right-hand corner here. This banner is available on all of the pages, so you can get to any of this information at any time. And now we'll jump into the metrics. So the B3 benchmarking metric, the namesake here, is taking that building information that I showed you, and it's calculating a EUI. So how many kBTUs per square foot for an entire year is that building, if it were built to current code, expected to use? So in this case, we've got over 1 million square footage because we're looking at the 3 dorm buildings together. And we're expecting them to use 87.8. Well, based off of the information that they entered in those meters, which I accidentally glossed over, but they've got the electric, steam, and chilled water meters in that editor. And we can go back if we have time to highlight how that information goes in. But all of that adds up to 74.7. So they're using less than we are anticipating that they would use. So that calculates out to an index ratio of 0.85, and then we're just highlighting that all of their data is complete for this 12-month period that we're looking at. And then we can use this to kind of scroll back in time and see how that changes. And then if we scroll forward, we can see that our percentage drops down. We're missing that most recent usage data. The monthly graph below highlights each month how they're performing against that benchmark. So we can see here in the summer months, May, June, let's go back and get July here. The summer months, we're doing great. In the winter months, we're hitting right at that benchmark. We can also filter down and look more at just the steam and see how that's doing. And so that's where we're kind of close. It helps to facilitate seeing, you know, where should we be looking for some of those potential savings. In all cases, we're using less than the benchmark, so we're not calculating any potential savings, but typically there's still always some potential somewhere. So being able to utilize that graph and help determine where that might be. So here I'll go back to the elementary school. We do have 5,000 in potential savings. I'm filtered to chilled water is where I left it at the dorm. This site doesn't have any, so that's why I've got the zeros there. But we'll turn on what it does have. And we can see here where, in this case, we're having the potential savings is on this natural gas side. You can easily, you know, eyeball it, but we can take out the electric and see more closely. So there's actually a little bit in electric as well. So the benchmark is great for determining what the building is expected to use versus what it actually is using and where that potential savings may be in the different sources. Switching over to the B3 peer. This is looking at all of the different sites within B3 benchmarking and giving it a 1 to 100 score of how the site is performing to other peers within B3. So in this case, we're looking at other sites that have 64% classroom, 20 office, 10 gym, and there's 384 similar sites. This site, based off of its index ratio of 1.3, is down at the 11th percentile. So all these other sites are performing better via the index ratio than this particular site. So you may have a decent benchmark, but if other sites are performing even better, you might have a B3 peer rating that's a little bit lower. So that kind of makes sense how they're correlated, but yet different. The benchmark is looking at code and the B3 peer is looking at others. Schools are a great example here in the state of Minnesota. Schools are great for implementing all sorts of efficiencies. And so you may have a great B3 benchmark rating, but you still have a long ways to go to catch up to your peers of other schools. So that's the B3 peer. And then, as I mentioned, we're integrated with Energy Star. So being that this is an elementary school, it's an eligible building type. So we're pulling back the score that Energy Star would give this particular site based off of the attributes that were entered. And then the graph is just showing that rolling 12-month score. And you can see it's kind of trending down is where they've been headed here based off of their energy use. And the new thing here in the B3 baseline is our weather normalization. So historically, you've been able to select if you wanted to baseline weather normalize or actual weather normalize. And what we were using there is the average monthly temperature from the weather station that you had selected. And you would adjust one or the other to, you know, so if you were actual baselining, you would adjust the actual to account for the baseline weather, and then vice versa, you'd be adjusting the baseline usage to account for the actual weather. We've updated our weather normalization process now, and now we're using heating degree days and cooling degree days. and we are adjusting both of them to go against a typical weather period. So that's why you can see they both have an asterisk. They've both been normalized. If we turn that off, we'll see that they've both changed a little bit, the actual a little bit more than the baseline. And so now they are both adjusted to account for typical weather. We've got this new weather normalization window that highlights, hopefully highlights what's going on. So in this particular case here, we've got our electric signature going against our heating degree days. And the usage is kind of all over the board. There's a little bit of a slope here that we can see where it goes up just a tiny bit. And so that might be some supplemental heat going on, but we're explaining here that we couldn't find a good correlation. And so there isn't any weather normalization going on the heating side. We're not going to adjust the electric usage compared to the heating. Down here, we can see that there is more of a curve, but not a ton. So it probably, I didn't look to see, may not have a lot of cooling, but we can see a curve. And then here's our natural gas signature and its curve. And so as the weather normalization process is happening, it'll take a point here. We're providing a newsletter coming out shortly and some additional help files in here that will more clearly clarify how the weather normalization is happening. But we're taking the difference in heating degree days from what it actually was to what a typical month is, and calculating out that number of days difference times this slope, and that's what we're using to adjust. So a lot of algebra behind the scenes that we'll be able to showcase in a graph that we're working on to help explain that. For those that want to, yep, go ahead.
This is Molly. Just a quick question on that. Is this the same methodology that Portfolio Manager uses, or is this different?
Everyone's kind of got like their own tweak to it. They too are using heating degree days and cooling degree days. So it's more accurate, and especially like with Minnesota, we might have a blistering hot, crazy heat wave week. And then the next week we've got the polar Arctic freeze. And so you would have, you know, potentially high cooling and high heating in the same month. But if when we're looking at just average monthly temperature, those kind of negate each other. And so this is a little bit more accurate, but it is not exactly, like you won't get exactly the same calculation out of Energy Star.
Okay, thank you.
Fairly close. Here is the actual data. So if we get down to some that are more complete here, we've got, let's fill into our natural gas where we can see what the actual heating degree days and what the average was. So in this case, it wasn't as cold. And so we're actually adjusting the usage up, because typically there would have been more heating degree days in this April of 2006. And so our usage at actual was 3.2, and our new weather normalization usage is 3.9. So typically you would have used more based off of this heating degree day. And then here's where that weather station information is. By default, we click or select the nearest, but if for whatever reason you wanted to pick a different weather station, you know, you can do that. For Minnesota, that isn't as critical as those that live, you know, more in the mountain ranges, where the nearest weather station might be on the other side of peak and therefore have very different weather than them. But for us, we're pretty standard. So if there's other questions on weather normalization, you know, as you think of them, we can jump back to that. Visualizations, this has stayed similar in this release, but we've got the ability to look at the different energy sources. You can switch over and look at water, or you can look at all if you do have water and electric, or excuse me, energy costs entered. You can switch to all and see all of your costs. And then when you're at the site level, you can drill down and look at a specific meter or a selection of, you know, different meters. In this case, they just have the one electric and gas, so you could get to it just by doing energy. But if you did have multiples of a different sources that you wanted to look at, you could use this specific meters option. When you're looking at multiple different sources in energy, KB2 is going to be your default, but if you do drill down to a specific source, you can look at it in its named units. So you could look at electric in kWh or natural gas in therms. And then we've got carbon costs. And then if you do have some peak demand, you can see that as well. The different graph options, by default, you're looking at monthly. We do have a monthly year over year, and then also the rolling 12-month. So a couple of different views that sometimes folks don't always realize are there. And then also just an annual if you wanted to. So the annual is going to go off of calendar year. But if you do have a fiscal year that you'd like to report off of, you can do your fiscal year and then just utilize the table down below and have those fiscal year summary values as well. Similar to on the metrics tab, you can look at the benchmark and the baseline graphs. We also have the ability to set a target. So if you had a goal in your city, 20 by 20, that's a little outdated now, but if you had a goal of, you know, saving 30% by 2030, you could have that in and then see how you're on track for reaching that. So here is our baseline, and then our target is the orange line. So you can kind of see if you're on track for that. And then the other comparison option we have in here is for events. And so if you've done some energy efficiencies, you've done a lighting retrograde, you've done retrofit, you've done some other recommissioning, something where you are expected to see some savings, you can go in with an efficiency event. And what B3 will do is it'll look at the 12 months prior to that event and utilize that as your baseline. And then looking at the subsequent months, see how you're performing compared to that. So here our baseline for December 2013 to November 2014 was 92.9. So we're carrying that forward as our baseline and seeing how we are doing compared to that. So if we take out those incomplete months, we can see that the next year we did great, 16%. Something happened here in December. We had that big jump. And so that might be an anomaly, but this is a great way to try and catch those as well. You know, when you see a jump in your usage that you can't necessarily explain. And events can also be used to clarify, you know, if this was an actual jump, something happened, you can use an event. It wouldn't be an efficiency event, but just an event to highlight what went on here. So we've had folks, you know, where water mains broke, or something was leaking, or an outside damper was, you know, stuck open. So being able to highlight those and put a note here so that when people are looking at this, they can see, oh, this is why, you know, XYZ happened, and not have to track it down each time. So in the last minute here, I've got in the improvements, we've just done a little bit of rearranging and reformatting this, but similar information here as to what was in the improvements tab below. This is great. So back in the benchmark, we are looking by energy source. Here we're seeing more by end use. So we've got our base load here, and then our heating and cooling. So you can kind of help see where that potential savings is split, not only by the fuel source, but also by the end use. So it's pretty evenly split between base load and heating. So it's kind of highlighting that in this case, it wouldn't be an efficient use of time or capital to be investigating the cooling system. And then that same weather normalization option here to get to. And then Minnesota doesn't use reports too often. They were just got a couple of generic ones in here. These two are what's been in there, and we added the sample report. It just kind of throws all the different reporting widgets that we have that you can utilize. It is a little bit long, so it does take a minute or so here to run, but there's all sorts of different graphics that you can use, and either, you know, take this as is. You can send it out as a Word file, so you can kind of chunk up and take what's important to you and bring it into a presentation or into a different type of report. So that's kind of a quick run through, and I'll be on for the session. So if there's questions later, I am happy to answer them.
Thanks, Cheri. This was great. I encourage everyone to just like go into your account and explore these things and all of the different ways that you can use this information. If you need your account information, Cheri, who do they contact?
Let me go back. At the bottom of the Minnesota page, there's the contact information. So if you know who your data owner is, they can get you access via this share access link here. The data owner will have access to do that if you know who that is. If not, there's some contact forms here, so you can request access. Otherwise, you can email us or just give us a call as well. So
Thanks.
Yep.
Any quick questions from anyone before we move on? Got a couple minutes here. One, Cheri, I have, you mentioned a newsletter. How do you get on that?
Yep, so any user by default is on it when they set up their account. So unless you've told us you don't want the newsletter, you will get it by default. If you have in the past said you didn't want it, but you have since changed your mind, you can go up into your account. So where it says welcome in your name, here's your information, your security questions, and you can do manage alerts. And so here's the send marketing alerts is what we've called them. So newsletters are marketing alerts. You should probably rename that button because here it does say newsletter. So those should be consistently named the same so you know what you're clicking on. But yeah, it's that marketing alerts.
Perfect.
I always find different things when you're actually using it as a user.
Awesome. Well, if there's other questions that come up as we're going through the next presenters, just feel free to put those in the chat or raise your hand. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of the webinar as well today. And we'll follow up with all of our presenter contact information if you want to reach out to anyone individually as well. So thank you, Cheri.
Yes, thank you.
So now we're going to jump over to Noelle with the city of Roseville, who's going to talk a little bit more about how to use this. Like, what do you do as a city?
Sounds good. I will share hopefully the correct screen here. In a second. So you should be able to see my presentation, hopefully, not my desktop. Let me know if that changes.
There we go.
All right.
And I did
Perfect.
spotlight you. So for anyone looking, if the screen, the PowerPoint got smaller for you, you can just click on that and it'll make it bigger again.
Perfect. All right. Well, I am Noelle Bakken. I am the sustainability intern at the city of Roseville. And full disclosure, I've actually only been there since November, so I'm still getting my feet wet. And I'm still probably newer to B3 than almost everybody on this list, but our city is not new to B3. And I already learned some great things from Cheri, so I'm looking forward to bringing some of that back to work on after this call. So I thought I'd start out by just talking about kind of our timeline of our work in sustainability just to ground us in where we're at with B3. So we joined Green Step Cities in 2014 and started using B3 benchmarking shortly thereafter. We started with just the buildings on our City Hall campus first, and then later we added several new park buildings that were built as part of a parks renewal project. So we used B3 to track our energy usage and do some research for when we were looking into adding solar to our City Hall buildings. We also used it to track when we did an LED light bulb retrofit. So those are two items that I definitely want to add as events in our B3 tracking that are currently not in there. We did wind up installing on-site solar on 3 city buildings in 2019. That year, we also achieved Soul Smart Gold, which was an exciting event. In 2020, we achieved Green Step 4. We also joined the Partners in Energy program, which is my primary project that I'm working on right now with the city. So if anyone has questions on that, I'm also happy to answer those. And then in 2021, we achieved Green Step 5, and we also won the Best of B3 for local government. So we track the energy usage of 12 of our city buildings, which is pretty much most of what we have available to track outside of like streetlights and that sort of thing. That makes up about 230,000 square feet. Our data comes in from Portfolio Manager. We don't actually have our solar meters in B3, but B3 support is helping us to add those. So that should be in there soon, and I'm looking forward to playing around with the data there. But we were able to see based on B3 that we used 11.2% less energy in the last 12 months compared to 2019. I'm not going to compare to 2020. I'm sure a lot of you also had shutdowns in 2020, so our energy usage looks great for 2020, but it's not really a true reflection of how we did. So that's one nice thing about B3 is you can choose your baseline year that you want to compare to. So in this graph, you can see that I'm using the 2019 data as our comparison baseline. In 2021, this is not 100% of our data because our December data was not in yet, but you can see that we're still on track to be lower than 2019. The primary ways we use the reports in B3, we use it to report out for city council updates. They're very interested in what we're working on with sustainability. Our Public Works, Environment, and Transportation Commission is also very dedicated to our environmental work in the city. So those two we definitely use the most. We've got a Public Works Commission meeting next week, so we've got our big sustainability update that we're going to be using some B3 data for that meeting. We also use it to identify areas we can improve. So for us, our skating center is our oldest building, and it's probably next on our list for renovation and improvements. And then we also just use it as motivation to make sure that any new buildings that we put out are built up to the greener standards, so we can kind of see those energy usages continue to drop as we add buildings in. So some of the reports that I wind up using, I actually use the improvement report that Cheri mentioned is in there, but isn't widely used. Because we only have 12 buildings, it's not a huge report. It's a great way for me to see just how every single site is performing year over year. And again, I use it to compare to 2019 right now instead of versus 2020. Here's one of our sites. This is our City Hall site, which we do have solar on this site. Whoops, sorry about that. We do have solar, and I plan on adding that in as an event so I can kind of see when that happened, because we did see a drop in energy usage once solar went in. And then as Cheri showed, the visualizations tab has a lot of really nice different reports that you can pull. So one of the things that we're looking at is annual emissions for our 2040 comp plan goals. And so it's really nice to be able to see how those emissions have dropped year over year. And I plan on going in and adding, like I said, the solar that we added in and the LED light bulb retrofit, so we can also do a little bit more drill down based on individual buildings and how we're doing overall on the sites. But as in my former life, I was a data analyst, so I really appreciate all of the ways that B3 does all the hard work for you. So you don't have to, you can export everything into Excel if you want to, but you definitely don't have to if you're not data savvy. So I've been having a lot of fun playing around with it. So that's all I had. Like I said, I'm still pretty new to everything since I've only been here for a few months, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone might have about how to track city usage.
Having a battle with my mute button there.
Oh, no.
Thanks, Noelle. That's great, and congratulations to Roseville for getting the Best of B3 Benchmarking Award last year. I have a question to start things off.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about your internship with the city, and is B3, and you mentioned Partners for Energy and the energy planning work that you're doing, what all are you working on, and kind of, is this a new internship for the city, or how do you kind of get involved with that?
New-ish. So I came on after we had a Minnesota GreenCorps member for about a year who helped with kind of the planning phase of the Partners in Energy. And then after he left, it was pretty clear that the city still needed a little extra help with that, kind of going from planning into implementation for Partners in Energy. So that's when I came on in November. So Partners in Energy is our primary focus for my role. We've got 4 different goals for that. We're trying to reach out to energy burdened households to make sure that we can help them with reducing their energy load by like weatherization and that kind of thing, or learning about different energy bill assistance programs that are out there. We want to improve residential weatherization and energy efficiency, commercial, like working with small and medium-sized businesses on energy efficiency, and then also increasing usage of renewables across the city. So we just hosted a webinar last week on different renewable programs, and we're doing a wind source challenge right now. So trying to get 30 people signed up by Valentine's Day for wind source. So that's primarily the focus of my work. I will be working a little bit to help us maintain our Step 5 green step status too. So Kristen and I are actually meeting next week to talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, I think the ultimate goal is we would love to have someone on our team full time to do sustainability too. So I report up to our environmental manager right now. So
okay. Great, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Noelle, Roseville, B3 benchmarking? Quiet group today. Usually you're much more chatty.
B3 is just shocking everybody into awe.
Yeah. All right, well, I won't push it. If you have questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat and we can circle back to anything as well. So thank you, Noelle, for sharing.
Sure thing. Thanks so much.
All right, so sticking with benchmarking for a little bit longer here, we'll have Leo talk a little bit about, both Cheri and Noelle hinted at this B3 benchmarking automation. So Leo, I think you're going to share your screen.
Yeah, let me pull that up for you. Just a second.
And please introduce yourself. Hopefully you'll share your role.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes. Okay, and you're putting it in presentation mode. Good.
Great. Okay. Well, my name is Leo Ndiaye, and I am currently serving as a Minnesota GreenCorps member at the Center for Sustainable Building Research. And there, where it's been really great working with everybody, working in B3, and then also in the center, I myself am working on B3 benchmarking. So this is really just supporting public entities around Minnesota with 3 key services. So the first is going to be automation, the second is data quality, and the third is analytics. Ooh. Sorry about that. Okay. So the 3 parts of this presentation are going to, I'm going to have to check a little bit about the last 2 because I'm not sure whether they themselves will still be up to date with Cheri's update for B3, but I think they'll still be useful. So the first service that I'm offering is the B3 Energy Meter Automation Program. And so this is really a joint effort between the GreenCorps, the Center for Sustainable Building Research, and Willdan, who are operating B3. And this is a service provided at no charge to public entities. And we basically will help you set up automated energy data. So this means that when you are perhaps participating in green subsidies, for example, you won't have to enter that data in manually anymore. You'll be able to just have Xcel or CenterPoint send that information over into B3 automatically. And so, as I'm sure everybody is aware, there are massive benefits associated with B3. I'm not sure what systems people use, but B3 really offers great functionality, great organization, and with the automation component makes it very, very time efficient. And so there are really three steps. I can elaborate a little bit more about them if you're interested, but it's a very simple process. So the first step is to share your meter billing statements with me. That will be required so that we can identify every meter in B3 that we're going to automate. And then you'll just need to have the person who's the authorized signer for the meters sign a specific consent form for each utility. And I will send those over to you once we've finished up with the billing statements. And then, roughly about 2 weeks out from when I've received the signed consent form, we will have your meters automated for you, and you will be saving a lot of time. So I have my email here at the bottom of the page, so please feel free to reach out to me if you're interested. That'll be Ndiaye, Ndiaye @umn.edu. Feel free to reach out to Pat as well if you don't manage to catch my email. The next part of my presentation will focus on improving B3 data quality. And so if you're interested in improving the quality of your data, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm just going to show you a quick operation for gaining a bird's eye view of your data quality. So when you go into B3, you'll initially see a couple of metrics here, such as site completeness or meter data. And these are really good for gauging overall how your data is doing. But if you'd like to gain a full list of all the errors, warnings that are present in your data, and this will really improve the accuracy of the analytics that you extract from B3. What you can do is prepare a custom export where you'll go to data and then you go to export. And here you'll be able to export a custom a custom Xcel document that will have errors and warnings for every site at your particular entity. The Xcel spreadsheet will look very similar to this, depending on how many errors you have, but every error that appears here under the text column will be an error that can be found somewhere in B3. So if you want to figure out, okay, what are all the errors that we have for our site? Are there meters that are missing data? You'll be able to export the spreadsheet, identify what those errors are, and potentially not have to deal with anything if they aren't very serious errors. Some of the more serious errors would be having meters at a site that are missing data because the overall score that you would get would be a little bit off. And so the error, as you can see, appears here in B3. And it's just a really easy way to get a good overview of all the meters at your site. So the next part of assistance I'm providing is using B3 data analytics. And Cheri went into really great detail about this in her presentation. She focused on the meters, and she also went over the reports function. I'll just show you how to do it again. I feel kind of like I'm presenting Windows XP now that I've seen what the updated B3 looks like. But it'll be very similar. You'll just generate a report, and some of the interesting things that you'll have on the report are going to be a initial overview for your organization as a whole, and then you also have a list of performance for each site specifically. And so you'll have these items on the first page, and then on the other pages you'll have other indicators such as the benchmark score, as well as the potential saving associated with that particular site. And so you also have some information that's useful at the dashboard, such as the energy baseline. Depending on how you've configured your dashboard and what shows up there now with the new update, there might be more information, but the energy baseline is a really great way to gauge how your site or your organization has been doing over time, because it'll let you know, are we using more energy than we did in the past, or are we using less? Metrics will also allow you to look at your performance. You can change the time series that you're looking at here with that scroll button. And then you also have some other important information, such as your potential savings in dollars and kBTU per year, as well as CO2. In visualizations, you'll have very similar information. You'll have your energy usage intensity report. You'll have your benchmark report. And then another really useful report is the total monthly cost. That will allow you to see how much your site is using in dollars over time. And this is a really good visualization if you want to share it with somebody at your organization. You can easily download it, and it's really a useful way to present performance. B3 themselves has really great videos on their website about how to use the program, so I highly recommend checking those out. But as we are getting that new update, I'm not sure how up to date these videos are. So I still recommend checking them out. But I would also just make sure that you're taking the update into account. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, everybody. This is my email, and feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in our data automation, our data quality work, or our energy efficiency analytics work. So thank you, and please feel free to ask any questions if you have any.
Leo, just to underline a point that you made, while the automation is limited to Xcel and CenterPoint, if they want your assistance with cleaning up data or with packaging the reporting out, that's not limited to those two utilities, correct?
Yes, that's precisely right. I can help out anybody with any utility if it's on the data quality or the energy efficiency work. But for automation, we can only work with Xcel and CenterPoint.
And that's because the tools exist only for those utilities. It's on the utility side of things that need to have that automated process set up so that we can capture it and push it into B3.
Well, without further ado, I guess I'll hand it over to Pat.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks, Pat, for those clarifications. Those are the same questions I had, and I think others did as well. One more, I like this question from Jonathan. That I don't know, Leo, Cheri, someone can answer. Are there data loggers or devices to be put on LP tanks or meter points that do not have smart functionality? Nobody knows.
Yeah, no one else is jumping in. There's definitely all sorts of technology out there to be able to meter different devices or add additional sub-metering, kind of like I talked about with that dorm example of being able to designate how much of the steam is going to each of the buildings. So there's definitely different ways of getting that data. It may need to be manually entered, so it's not anything that's coming from a utility that could get automated. But there is all sorts of devices that it can be read from. One thing that I didn't talk about is with the question about outside of Xcel, we have had organizations that, larger organizations where they've got multiple meters and they have designed a custom import. So for a one-time fee, we can have our software developers code a custom import that can read that particular format and get all of their monthly data in. So they either go out to the BAS site and pull their data, or they get it emailed to them once a month, and then they just import that into B3 without having to do any formatting. So it's a few clicks and they can get all their data in. So that's another way for those that are outside of Xcel and CenterPoint territories. And note, there's a handful of utilities that are like subsidiaries of CenterPoint, and so those are included as well.
Good tip. So if you're curious, reach out to Leo. Great. Well, thank you. We are shifting gears now to hear from Pat, also at CSBR, a little bit more about some other B3 tools and programs, guidelines in SB 2030, and whatever else Pat wants to throw in there. So
right.
Welcome, Pat.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? You should be seeing
Yes.
B3 guidelines in SB 2030. So I'm going to do a little bit of hopping in and out of this presentation because I think it's useful to see some of the other things. But I'm here to talk about the other elements of the B3 guidelines, or the B3 program, and the SB 2030 energy standard. Because there's less buildings in that. So I asked the initial breakout group if anybody had worked with other parts of the program, and they hadn't, but that is very typical because we just have a much larger net for the B3 benchmarking work. But B3 benchmarking exists as part of a network of related programs, and these programs are intended to assist in both the design, construction, and the operation of more sustainable buildings. And here's a little sketch of where those programs fit in the essentially the life cycle of a building. If in the early design, we've got B3 guidelines, which I'll talk about in a second, and SB 2030 that establish these project specific requirements, really do that kind of target and goal setting exercise. Through design, these programs help manage the work of the design team around specific sustainable design metrics. Through construction, and then in operation, there's a few more opportunities present where we have the benchmarking, which we've talked about already today, but also a couple of other programs come into play, and I'll talk about those towards the end of my 20 or so minutes here. I'll start with the B3 guidelines, and this is the one that, alongside B3 benchmarking, is the earliest that came into play. And this is a set of sustainable building criteria that are applicable to the design and construction of new buildings and major renovations. They establish performance goals for 5 categories of impact. This is site, water, energy, indoor environmental quality, and the materials and waste. Most folks that work with the B3 guidelines program are doing so because they're required to, as part of receiving general obligation bond funding from the state of Minnesota. We've had several versions of the guidelines to date. This grew out of an effort in Hennepin County from the late 90s. And so going from B3 guidelines initially in 2004, we are now up to version 3.2 of the program. And then we do updates periodically to account for changes in practice, better technology, better tools, and to kind of keep pushing on what is achievable, but robust, sustainable building guidelines. Here are the 5 categories, and these are, and I'll get a little bit more detail into these, and then we track the progress of projects and allow teams to have a kind of single location to be able to sign off on the various guidelines through the tool that you're seeing on the right, which is the B3 guidelines tracking tool. And I'll just pull this over to show you what this looks like. So here is a place where the entire team can see the same file. Different roles can be assigned for different design team members, and they can go and upload information relevant to the completion of their guidelines. And also provides a link to where you'll actually be able to link to our website to be able to read in more detail what specific requirements are. And so this also does things like managing. It'll let design team members set up different roles, and then those roles get identified of what they need to go in and sign off. This helps manage that that effort. I'll also note that all of the stuff that I'm talking about here today can be seen on our b3mn.org website. So b3mn.org gives you links to guidelines, SB 2030, which we'll talk about in a second, and then these other 3 elements of the program. I'm really not talking about benchmarking today because I think that's been covered in a lot of great detail already. Okay, so we've got the B3 guidelines in these areas. Here's a little bit more in depth in terms of what we're asking for. Design and construction process, that's where you will you're required to do things like commission, to put forward a set of owner's project requirements, and it does a little bit of the work of managing the basically information flow between the owner team and the design and construction team. Operations process, we pick up a few things like the post occupancy evaluation. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in each of these guidelines because we don't have that much time today, but I just wanted to give kind of a brief snapshot of the scope of the program. Okay, that's B3 guidelines in as briefly as I can present it. The SB 2030 energy standard came into place in 2009 and is a progressive energy target program. So this sets as an energy target for a building increasing reductions off of a baseline, and the baseline is typical buildings in 2003. And this is aligned with an effort at the national scale called Architecture 2030, and we've customized it and we've kind of built it out for Minnesota. So what it does is takes a 2003 average building of the same use of the building that's participating in the program. So if you're doing a warehouse, we're target setting this on a warehouse. If you're doing a lab building, we're setting this on a lab building. If you're doing a city hall, we're target setting based on a city hall, and then asks for increasing reductions from that typical building from our modeled typical building in 2003, increasing reductions every 5 years. So if you build a building in 2015, your target is not as aggressive as if you're building a building in 2020 or 2025 or 2030. So this is cranking our way towards net zero. And here's the reduction schedule for that. And that's again from that 2003 average building. We're also doing this based on a carbon reduction, but as the grid has improved, it's still energy, it's still that EUI number that most folks are going to bump into first. Oh, and please do stop me if I'm going a little bit too quickly. I'm running quite fast through some complexity here, so I will keep an eye out for the. Well, actually, I can't see if anybody's raising their hands, but
I'll let you know if there's any questions or hands raised, but not at this time.
Perfect. Thank you.
And we're good on time, so take what you need.
So this is also tracked embedded within that B3 guidelines tracking tool and lets folks set specific energy targets for their buildings. And so, as I mentioned, we're looking at setting targets that are based on what the buildings are doing, so that we're not setting the same energy target for a higher energy intensity building as we would a lower intensity building. So this is really, we're trying to get an apples to apples look here at how much energy reduction is possible in these buildings. So what this does is establishes that 2003 average, that base case, and then also takes that reduction and provides that energy target for projects. And then as a project would move through the program, they would produce a energy model that would document reduction corresponding to these targets. One issue that we've accommodated is that if you look at just this reduction schedule and look at the potential for energy efficiency savings alone, some projects will bump up against what is either technically or cost effectively achievable in terms of this reduction. And this is some work from Willdan in the ADA program, showing that there are bounds to what can be met with just cost-effective energy efficiency measures. And so in 2020, we expanded the program a bit to include a broad array of renewable energy options that can be met to make it kind of the remainder of the way there to these energy targets. And the way that works is projects would look first at what's available on site to offset their energy use. And then if there's no measures that are available on site, to move then to measures that are in their portfolio. And then barring that, looking at procuring renewable energy essentially from the renewable energy market. So this allows project teams to bring a broader set of renewable energy resources to bear to offset their demand and to hit their target. And the way that works, and I'll show a graph of this, looks like 2003 average building. This is a significant reduction, that 80% reduction. Looking at efficiency measures better than code, we'll get some of the way to this target. Then on-site and off-site resources, bringing them the remainder of the way there to this energy target. And so this is essentially a hierarchy that project teams step through, looking first at what resources are available on-site, and then looking off-site if there's not sufficient resources there. Because we want to still hit these targets, but we want to do so in a way that that accounts for the various constraints that projects actually are seeing as they're working through this. Okay, SB 2030 operations is a part of the SB 2030 program that focuses on buildings, as you'd probably guess, in operation. The intent here, the kind of framing concept, is that buildings operate efficiently only if each of the energy consuming basically devices or systems use only as much energy as they need to do the thing that you're asking them to do. And so this is picking up, if you've got a project that's scheduled to run 3 more hours a day, if you've got a building that's scheduled 3 more hours a day, then you have folks in that building, you're using energy you don't need to use. And so a couple of ways to think about managing these energy consuming devices. One would be to kind of continually go and check in on them and ensure that they are operating as they're intended to operate. Though, with the complexity of most buildings and most building systems, and with the limited amount of time, expertise, and funding that I think we're all generally experiencing, that can be difficult to get your boiler tech in every 2 weeks every winter for always. So another approach, and the approach that kind of underpins the energy efficient operations program, is to implement inexpensive, quick diagnostic tasks that are intended to essentially raise flags when those systems are operating outside of their kind of ideal or peak performance. And so this is the basis of what we call the energy efficient operations manual. And so so these are essentially determining diagnostic tasks, these quick checks to verify the building is operating, or these kind of portions of the building are operating as they're intended to operate, and then having somebody go and actually verify them. And so this is trying to kind of thread the needle in terms of what is a limited amount of work that you can implement that can be done without a ton of expertise behind it, but that would serve to help keep the building operating as efficiently as it needs to still do what that building's function is. what the system's functions are. And so some examples of this are, making sure that your air handlers are running on timers and that its schedule has been updated. Mixed air temperature, if you have an economizer, your mixed air temperature running within kind of specific bounds, within the specific curve, can be a really good indicator of making sure that your economizer is running as it's intended to run. And then it's not glamorous, but if you've got your lighting on timers, making sure that that timer is corresponds to the actual use of the building. This is a web application that sends these reminders out and essentially has 4 key functions. You develop a task that's customized for a building, you assign those tasks to people, and then you schedule the tasks, what the interval that these checks are occurring at, and then provide some tracking about what that overall task status is. And so this is intended to be a kind of ongoing operation exercise, but we really are cognizant that anybody working in facilities is already inundated with task tracking and alerts and BAS systems that are sending out, this thermostat is broken. We understand this is there is already a data rich landscape that folks are working in. So this is really trying to be as streamlined as we can make it. That's energy efficient operations manual. And the last one I'll discuss is the post occupancy evaluation work. And so this is a survey that the building occupants are given after they've gone through the B3 guidelines program that gives a snapshot of how successful the building is in achieving occupant satisfaction with the indoor environmental quality. And so this is a process that we facilitate. So we work with building occupants to identify who to survey and basically send a survey out that we can get some statistically valid understanding of the occupant satisfaction, including a breakdown of that occupant satisfaction in lots of kind of granular categories. And so this is, I just took a snapshot here of these different IAQ categories. These correspond to things like acoustic condition, to the acoustic privacy. This corresponds to how people are feeling about their thermal environment. So you really do get a good level of detail of how your building occupants are experiencing the space that they're in. And we've got about 60 buildings that we've done this survey for. We generally do this on larger projects because you have a larger pool of occupants to survey. We don't typically see this for projects that have less than 25. And we are currently able to do this for projects that have either a workspace, so typical office, or classrooms or dormitory buildings. So we're a little bit limited in the survey instruments that we have brought to bear, but this is for projects that are going through the B3 guidelines program. We pick up this when their projects are in operation to both close the loop on that building, to inform that building about how they are doing with their occupant comfort, in part because some of these categories can be addressed by operational measures, but also to inform the further development of our B3 guidelines program. One area identified here, for example, is for the first, 30 or so evaluations that we've done, acoustics actually came up as a area where there was a lot of occupant, I wouldn't say discomfort, but an area that we could be improving with the design and construction of the buildings that fall under this program. And so that was an area that we looked to for updates of our program. So we look at this as a very useful way to capture, how people are actually experiencing these buildings. This is one of the higher performing projects that came through with, you actually get an overall satisfaction score for projects. And this breaks out into broad categories like satisfaction, how folks feel that their building is supporting their work performance and how folks feel that their building is supporting their health. And so this is through the lens of occupant reported information, but we think it's a very useful lens into how folks are experiencing these buildings. The last two things I'll note is we have projects that have gone through programs listed on our case studies database. Again, that's linkable from b3mn.org. And then just note the project partners and sponsors. We're working for the Department of Commerce and the Department of Administration, and with CSBR, Willdan, Center for Energy and the Environment, LHB, and Martin & Garrett Design and Research. And I will go ahead and close out my presentation and see if there's any questions.
Ooh, thank you, Pat. That was a really great overview. And I appreciate it. I appreciated the back and forth with the slides and then the website. I thought that was great. Any questions for Pat? Feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, add it in the chat. There was a lot that was talked about.
This is Noelle Bakken with Roseville. I had a quick question, and this might be just kind of a naive question, but from a city standpoint, which of these guidelines are probably the ones that you would recommend us using both? Because it sounds like the post occupancy evaluation really wouldn't make sense for most city buildings, but would something like energy efficient operations be something worth working towards, or like the SB 2030 standard?
So the SB 2030 and the B3 guidelines are for projects that are either new construction or significant renovation. So it's just difficult to apply a aggressive energy target to an existing building because there's just less opportunities there. I'd say right. The tools that you've seen in benchmarking and that I think you're very engaged with to date are set up for existing buildings. And then also if you've got buildings that are interested in looking at the energy efficient operations program, please drop me a line and I can connect you with my colleague Garrett, who heads up that program. And that's the ones that are really set up for existing buildings. If you're not a project that's going through guidelines in SB 2030 for the POEs, we are going to be making that as available. But there'll likely be a fee associated with that because it's outside of our funded work. But it's still a good way to pick up how folks are experiencing their buildings. In part, if you're looking at renovations or looking at projects that you might want to update in the future, understanding where that need is through a mechanism or through an instrument like this can be used. Many folks have indicated that's a useful piece of data.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, I think there's a couple opportunities that we can use in the future for the city. So thanks.
I forgot to mention it. My email is patsmith@umn.edu. patsmith@umn.edu. I always forget to have that on my last slide.
We'll share that out with everyone too. So I have a question, Pat. You mentioned in the guidelines specifically that that was required for any state bonding projects, funded projects. Are you seeing projects voluntarily use the guidelines and the SB 2030? And how does that process work? Are architects like, can you just go to an architect and be like, I want to do this, and they'll just know what to do?
Some architects will, especially if they're used to doing public work. I mean, there are certainly teams that are more experienced with the guidelines, but our intent is to be accessible to folks that might not be used to working with the green building program. We see a few projects coming through from a voluntary basis. And we have some that are being required to, particularly SB 2030, to do so because of city policy. For example, the city of St. Paul requires projects that they fund, both public and private, to meet SB 2030 alongside a kind of additional set of requirements. And so we're seeing that as being kind of picked up in the marketplace for those projects that are outside of the general obligation required projects.
Thank you.
Just to touch a little bit more on that, is there the state then making sure that you're meeting the B3 guidelines, or kind of how does that work to ensure compliance? Or is that not necessarily, is it more like, you know, we chose to follow it, therefore we're more likely to get bonding dollars, and here's how we lined up with it? Or is there an actual kind of scorecard, sort of like a LEED certified building, where you actually have a bunch of fees to show that you did it correctly?
It's so if you are looking at going after bond funding, I would suggest identifying that to your design team, just so that it's not a shift from, you know, not following B3 to following B3. Is the question who certifies the project is meeting B3 if it's outside of state funding?
Yeah.
So in part that's done through our platform, in part that's done essentially by me. That the project team would be working with our platform, would be receiving some of this information and verifying compliance. And additionally, we have a third-party reviewer at Center for Energy and the Environment that picks up the in-depth energy review for the SB 2030 program.
So they would actually, you guys would help actually looking over
Yep.
the architectural plans and ensuring that, like, hey, here's an area where you can improve, and doing it before we get the final version of the draw completed.
So yeah, the and financial side of things is a little bit outside of my
Right.
my expertise. I'm more on the building side of things, but the platform, that tracking tool that we showed, if you dig into those specific guidelines, actually pick up some of the performance metrics, and so you would have, you know, your stormwater person or your civil engineer inputting specific information around total suspended solids rates for the flow off of the project, and the tool itself does some of the work to make sure that the project is identifying that they are, you know, hitting these performance targets.
Okay.
Okay, a question from Timothy Nolan here. Has there been an assessment of concrete results from the program? Total building square foot, total KBTU reductions, total CO2 reductions, renewable energy on-site generation capacity, etc. So overall, what are we seeing for outcomes?
So we do pick up those numbers for the SB 2030 program and compare that back to, you know, code baseline buildings. But I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I can provide those because we do report out that to the legislature. You know, what are the efficiency gains above code that the state buildings that are achieving?
Great, Pat. If you want to share that with me, I can forward it along in our webinar recap to everyone later this week. Well, not seeing any other questions or hand raised. So again, we'll have some time for Q&A, but we have one more presentation. So thank you, Pat, for sharing. And we're going to hear from Gail a little bit more about how all of this actually gets used in the real world. And so I'm going to, Gail, do you want to introduce yourself? And I'll get your video pulled up here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. My name is Gail Hedstrom, and I'm the director of the Fergus Falls Public Library. We have been located in our current location since 1986. And when we opened in 1986 at this location, it was a new construction building. By the early 2000s, it was clear that we had already outgrown the space. So a needs assessment was done that lasted for a number of years and involved many community members, community groups, and our architects, BTR architects. This comprehensive study gathered data from the community and incorporated the B3 guidelines to design a new building. And before we watch the video, I would just like to tell you a little bit about the funding, because I think it also comes into play, you know, as why the B3 guidelines are important. But our funding came from, we started by applying for a state grant, and these state grants are specific for public libraries that are building or remodeling to become more accessible or achieve greater energy efficiency. We also received over $3 million in private donations through a foundation, And then the rest was a sales tax initiative. So we needed to get a vote from the people to approve this project, and that vote did pass by about 70%. So with that, I invite you to watch this video that was made for the B3 Awards.
Thanks, Gail. I'm going to play. Let me know if you cannot hear the sound.
The newly expanded and renovated Fergus Falls Public Library is thanks to a multi-year-long process. It was designed and built with community participation and leadership, guiding the way to a new and unique facility. Roughly doubling the size of the library, BTR architects worked alongside library stakeholders in the city, along with the full inclusion of a diverse set of library patrons and friends. This included young and old, artists and tech enthusiasts, environmentalists, business people, cultural groups, and readers of all interests. The new library was designed with a special focus on young people and their families, building for the future using sustainable practices, adaptability, and the efficient use of resources, emphasizing the character of both the community and local landscape. The form and materials of the library connect visually to neighboring buildings and local landmarks. New wood trusses that were added match the original timber roof framing. Preservation of memorable elements like these from the past enliven the experience of library visitors by connecting with history, while the new fully dimmable LED lighting fixtures call attention to the modern. Several relationships made Fergus Falls Library a success. For example, the partnership with local utility Ottertail Power was formed to design for energy savings and a commitment to Minnesota's B3 and SB 2030 energy standard, which is meant to significantly reduce the energy and carbon emissions in Minnesota's buildings. Performance is measured in a number of categories, such as site, water, energy, indoor environment, materials, and waste. Fergus Falls Library utilizes a high-performance building envelope that will minimize heating and cooling loads on the mechanical system, while simultaneously providing for views to the outdoors and natural daylight throughout the interior. It does this with controls that dim the light fixtures automatically where the natural light is abundant. The sun control fins on the west-facing windows shield the interior from the glare and additional heat that arrive later in the day. The light shelves on the interior bounce light deeper into the building. Balancing the daylight through the building are newly added clear-story windows called light monitors. These face north in the vaulted ceiling, bringing daylight deeper into the building without additional heat. The landscape along the west face of the library acts as a stormwater collector that can redirect the water to the detention and treatment field that the city has created across the street. Stormwater isn't the only thing flowing underground, though. A new geothermal heating and cooling system runs beneath the east parking lot, which includes a loop of 24 wells running 300 feet deep. This system has helped the building be 52% more energy efficient than comparable buildings. The advanced heating, venting, and cooling system includes water source variable refrigerant flow systems throughout the library. This system uses small refrigerant pipes instead of large air ducts to move energy around, allowing for smaller plenum spaces and the vaulted truss ceilings. You'd probably walk right by it and not even notice, but this bridge carries all the refrigerant pipes from the equipment room to the rest of the library. The HVAC system also uses quiet and efficient electronically commutated motor fans, which supports the library's acoustic environment. The acoustic performance is also enhanced by discrete panels along the walls of the vaulted areas in the new children's library. The colorful wood slat ceiling and walls also integrate an acoustic mesh all along the path to the children's library. Another feature that would go quietly unnoticed is the use of environmentally safe carpets and adhesives that don't pollute the air in the library. And humans weren't the only living creatures considered at Fergus Falls Library. Bird-safe windows were added to the high-risk zones, like these corner windows. Children, teens, and adults of all ages are welcome in areas dedicated to reading and creating, playing and researching, connecting online, and meeting in person. And at Fergus Falls Public Library, they'll be able to do so for decades to come.
I love that video.
Yeah, I was asked to speak a little bit about why communities might want to consider this when they are doing new construction or renovations. And one thing that stands out to me is that sustainability and green practices are becoming more and more important to people. And we see this, that people are making decisions about where they live based on what a city's green practices are or sustainability practices. They're asking those questions before they relocate. And we also know that people are choosing how they invest, like the investments they make, the purchases they make. These are issues that are really important to them. So I think it's something that communities can't and shouldn't ignore, but should really pay attention to. And we talk a little bit about social infrastructure, and I think especially during the pandemic, and I should, qualify, our building just opened in January of 2019. So we were really just enjoying, that new open. And of course, just like everyone else, we're greatly impacted by COVID. But because we had this, doubled our space from 13,000 square feet to 26,000 square feet, we were able to reopen in a fairly timely manner and accommodate social distancing and safe practices for the public. And they were very grateful because we had, private study rooms for people. We could accommodate online learners and people who needed to work from home, people who needed to attend funerals remotely. I mean, we just could provide these services that if we were a closed building, we just could not have done. Our air filtration system was up to date. So there were a lot of, pluses for us in going through that really difficult time. They were really mitigated. And I think a lot of our design, and a couple of things you didn't really get to see, but on the north side of the building, there's also an outside reading garden where people can sit outside and read, continue to use Wi-Fi if necessary. And on the south side of our building, we have a pollinator garden. It's not a complete rain garden, but it does hold water, but it wouldn't probably meet the complete definition. But again, environmental practices that the public can enjoy. And we have incorporated that outdoor space on the north and the south where people can sit and learn. So really our library now extends outside of our walls, which was also part of the design and really incorporated nicely. So I think when we look at the amount of money that we maybe spend on public buildings, we want to make sure that they are part of our social infrastructure and that they are a place that people can enjoy and that people can come to learn about sustainability. And I think a public library is a great place for that. We want to be all about education. And when we can talk about our daylight harvesting, I think people get very excited about that and want to know how they can incorporate that into their businesses or homes. So we have seen the B3 standards as being incredibly, accommodating. I think sometimes we look at guidelines or requirements as difficult. Not the case at all. This is exactly where we should be when we're planning. So, and I also think, we allow nature to provide the services it can. When you saw, our rain, how the rain can gather around our building and be held until it can be effectively, it's like letting nature kind of do what nature can do when you take it into consideration, which again, is just cost saving and makes sense. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Gail, for sharing your experience with Fergus Falls Library. Do you think, just to start off with a question here, do you think that going through this process of using SB 2030 required more staff time for, either library or city staff to use this process versus, a traditional, design and build?
So, full disclosure, I started in the fall of 2019. So there was somebody else who was involved with the planning process, but I've read all those documents. And no, I think it was seamlessly infused into the process. And I think, of course, the architects were very knowledgeable in this area and could make that possible and bring that to the forefront really in a very natural, intuitive way. So absolutely, I would say no extra, no, it didn't add to the project as far as labor or workload.
Thanks. A couple other questions here from Grace. Amazing project. What are some of the ways that you're communicating to community members about the project's elements and impacts? So energy savings, sustainability, those kinds of things.
Yeah, really great question. So we do talk about those things. We obviously have shared out that video, and we have communication with our city council, where we'll report on those savings and findings and what's been accomplished. And then also just through maybe like, our newspaper column, different ways that we do outreach, we will occasionally tout some of those savings just to remind people of what a great investment this building was or is.
Thank you. And from Timothy, great story. Do you have any evidence that this kind of innovation is driving adoption in private sector buildings in the region? Interesting question.
So, yeah, not necessarily. I guess I can't point to anything, but I do know that we do have a number of new construction or buildings that are being renovated in our community that by private entities. And I do know that they have talked to us about these projects. And I think ultimately when they're looking at long-term savings, recognize that these kinds of the infusion of B3 standards is probably going to achieve that for them going forward. But I guess I can't name one specifically for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Gail, for sharing. I'm going to open it up. We've got 14 minutes left with our time here. So I'm open it back up to any questions, any comments, any other examples out there of how, anyone who we didn't hear from today, how you're using B3 benchmarking or the other B3 tools. Maybe you want to, give a little shout out to how things are going for you. So I'll just open the floor.
Hi, this is Connie from City of Brooklyn Park, and I got kind of a specific question. When I entered all of our meters and everything, I did enter all of our street lights and our street lights and signals and utilities, and none of those are benchmarked. So I'm wondering what the purpose of putting those all in. And can I delete them? And I don't know how to delete some sites and stuff. And I'm wondering if there's a plus to having those all in there. It just makes my reports very, very long. So just wondering what anyone's thoughts are on that.
So I will pipe it in. This is Cheri at Willdan. We have organizations that do, like you, put absolutely everything in. Their reasoning behind it is that they can go to the dashboard or visualizations and click on costs and see every penny that the city has spent on energy. So they like having that one-stop shop of being able to see everything. They have grouped theirs, and we've have different organizations do it different ways. Some of them have put them all into a single non-building site, so they can easily collapse them and not look at 50 different non-building streetlight sites. They just have one. We've had others that have grouped them by utility. They have just the way their city's laid out. They've got a few different electric utilities, so they have an Xcel non-building streetlight site, and I think like Stearns County, I'm thinking of St. Cloud. So they have theirs kind of broken out by utility. And I'm trying to think, there's a few other cities that have as well put everything in, especially those that have the benefit of using the Xcel automation and being able to get that all in. But it's totally up to you guys. If you don't see the value in it and you're not utilizing B3 benchmarking to aggregate all of your costs, then by all means you can delete them. There is a little trash can icon at the site level. So if you're on the data tab at the organization and there's the site table, you can expand that, and there's a little trash can there. If you have years of historical data that since it's there and you just want to keep it, then you could decommission the site. So, feel free if you need help with any of that to reach out to, either give us a call and they can walk you through that, or drop us an email and we can, reach out with some screenshots of how to do that. But it is up to the organization, whether you find it beneficial to have all those costs in there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else out there before I let you all go? It's that holiday. Everyone's just getting into the swing of things this week, I guess. Well, I will thank all of our everyone who presented today. Thank you to everyone who jumped in and joined us today. I'll close things out here with here's a list of connecting you back to the Green Step Cities program. Here are some specific actions that are related to B3, benchmarking, SB 2030, operations maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have participated in these things, these are kind of the actions where you can go on and enter your reports. And if you're curious and want to explore some of the other B3 programs and tools, you can find some resources here as well. And we'll share these later this week with you all as well. And then coming up, we have some additional workshops coming. I actually just found out this morning we're changing the date of the to February 17th for smart salting for parking lots and sidewalks training. And then our next regularly scheduled Green Step workshop is on solar subscriptions and green power purchasing. And so feel free to join us for those. You can find the link I will put in the chat here for you. But with that, thank you everyone for joining in today, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all for hosting. We appreciate it. Thanks for everyone who participated as well.